On today's show, we're talking about MarJon Beauchamp and how many points did he score on the weekend? 83 points. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? I'm not 100% sure, but Sam Vecini is going to tell us. He's from The Athletic, as we all know. Then we're going to talk about MarJon in year two as well. It feels like a big year for him. So how does he make the most of this? And we might wrap it up by asking what's going on with Damian Lillard, the NBA, the Miami Heat, and trade demands. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me from The Athletic, when we want to talk about young talent specifically, we know that I need to get some help. And Sam Vecini is always on call from The Athletic, I mentioned, and the Game Theory podcast as well. So plenty of MarJon Beauchamp chat on today's show that is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And we thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every weekday, particularly through the off season, because there's always news, including 83-point performances, Sam. So if you haven't yet, subscribe, drop a like, a comment, and do all those things. It's free to do, and it really helps us. Sam, and I forgot to mention, and I usually mention when we podcast, another great Melbourne man. We're only a few minutes away here. I think we've got beers in our future later this week, which I'm very much looking forward to. But first, business. MarJon Beauchamp, I scroll on social media yesterday, and the NBA's posting all these clips. 83 points in this game. What should we even think about this?
We should think it's super cool. Like
Yes.
I love these Pro-Am events. I know that like they came under fire last year after Chet Holmgren got hurt. I believe, if I remember correctly, it might have been in the Crawsover, which was the same event that MarJon just scored 83 in. Don't quote me on that necessarily. But look, I think that these events are super cool, and anytime that a wider audience then typically gets a chance to go to NBA games, which we know have become more and more expensive over the years and have become a bigger investment for certain families to be able to bring, their kids to, for instance. Anytime that somebody does something like this and drops 83 points in one of these events, it's great. I love it. Like it's super cool. I'm never going to say, don't hold these events, don't do this, don't do that. These guys are going to be working out anyway. Like you get hurt working out in the gym in August just as easily as you can get hurt playing in one of these events, right? So they're cool. They're great for social media content, and they're great, especially I think for families up in the Pacific Northwest to be able to get a chance and go see some of their favorite players.
So you mentioned something that I wasn't planning on asking, but I think it's a good point that you make. And in Melbourne last week, there was a bunch of NBA players that were working out with Melbourne United, who's an NBL team. And I did have a few people comment to me that, they're playing 5-on-5. I don't know if the NBA teams would be too happy. But to your point, you can do it in front of people, scrimmaging. I don't know if there's some idea that these guys just don't work out or they don't play 5-on-5 in the offseason. This is what they do. They're basketball players. Accidents happen, unfortunately. Right. Sometimes in front of people, sometimes behind the scenes. But I agree with you on that point. These guys are going to be able to do this, so why not do it in front of fans?
Well, and so every year that I lived in LA for 8 years, and especially for the last 5 of them, I would go down to UCLA's Student Activity Center. It's called SAC, right? And you from mid-July onward through August will get to go and see not every NBA player, but a large portion of NBA players will go and get runs 5-on-5 there every single year. And I don't know if it's changed since I've moved, but it's these guys are going to play 5-on-5 regardless. Guys that are out in LA, guys that are out in Melbourne, like, I saw that, Josh Giddey and a bunch of the boomers and those guys were, right? They're going to play, and basketball players are going to play basketball. It's the reality. If you've seen these events, like it sounds like you were at the one at Hoop City, right?
Yep.
They're not going 100%. They're going, 70%, and they're getting some reps in. They're working on some specific things maybe. And it's low stakes and it's good development time. So yeah, I have no qualms about these guys playing in these events. And if unfortunate accidents happen, they were just as likely to happen when they were training. So yeah, I'm just never going to complain about it.
So we are, and I've acquired your services for a couple of podcasts here. So we are going to talk about Chris Livingston, Andre Jackson Jr., Amari Moore on tomorrow's show. But I think the way that the Bucks approach the offseason, we've discussed the depth on this team. We don't know what those rookies are going to be able to produce. You'll be able to give some insight for sure. But it does look like just on paper, the Bucks' depth has shrunk a little bit. Last year, you were talking about 12 veteran guys that could play, and we're talking regular season. So when you look at what the Bucks have done in the offseason, how big is this season for MarJon Beauchamp, and what do you expect the opportunities to be? Because year two, everything elevates a little bit, not only for him personally, but the value outside of the league, how they might view him. It feels like a big year.
I don't know if it is. It's kind of where I'm at. I think that anytime there's a coaching change, like there is in Milwaukee, it's clear that there is a bit of a different mentality maybe in terms of team building now. It felt like previously Milwaukee would almost only bring in players that they felt like could shoot, right?
Yep.
Whereas I think this draft, especially drafting Andre Jackson, for instance, bringing in some of the guys they did, like it feels like that shooting is now an important factor, but is not like the overriding factor if you're going to play guys around Giannis. And that is in and of itself a departure from what we have previously seen from the Milwaukee Bucks. Because of that slight departure, I wonder if it does potentially open up an interesting avenue for MarJon, because MarJon is a player that I felt like struggled to get on the court last year in large part because the shooting was inconsistent. You didn't know what you were going to get from it game by game. Like I think that he ended up shooting like 32 on, maybe 2 or 3 attempts per game, something like that. And when he got hot, like it was fine, but there are other games where it wasn't like that. And I think that is the biggest key to try and figure out with MarJon is, where is the shooting going to settle? What kind of floor spacing is he going to bring around Giannis, around Chris Middleton, around Drew Holiday, around all of the important players for the Milwaukee Bucks? And how does that compare to what Adrian Griffin values in other players? And is he going to value the energy, the aggression, the rebounding that MarJon brings to the table? Or is he going to value the shooting and floor spacing that Pat Connaughton brings to the table with athleticism? Is he going to value the pure shooting that Grayson Allen brings to the table? Is he going to value the veteran presence that Jay Crowder brings to the table? I think Bucks fans will probably hope that that's not the case after the way Jay finished last season. Is he going to value Malik Beasley? Is like another question here, because Malik is obviously there. What do they think of AJ Green as another very young player that showed some real flashes for Milwaukee? So I don't know. I think there are a number of different factors here that could impact MarJon's season. And I don't know that this is make or break. I think season 3 is probably more likely to be make or break. But I think that it's possible MarJon could earn the minutes to play. And I think that's what it'll be. It'll be a competition for him to earn the minutes to play.
That does feel like it's the case. You mentioned a wide variety of positional players, and I know positions are kind of whatever at the moment, but I think that's part of the question with MarJon. Where is he fit with this team, and where are the minutes going to come from? So I want to ask about his development, and we spoke about MarJon last year during the season, but I want to dive back into that and the idea of perhaps in some ways being a late bloomer because of what he went through the last few years. So I want to get to that next after we talk about FanDuel, our sponsor of today's show. You can take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting in everything from the money line to the over and under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. And it's not just about baseball at FanDuel, though. And if I take a look at the NBA championship odds, the Boston Celtics plus 470, the favorites, the defending champion Denver Nuggets next at plus 480, then the Milwaukee Bucks plus 600. And I feel like a fair few listeners of this podcast wouldn't even believe that the Bucks are third favorite for the title. But you can sign up today and visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, as I mentioned at the top, Sam is going to be with us again tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about Andre Jackson Jr., Chris Livingston, Amari Moore as well. Amari Moore, someone that I want to find out a little bit more about. So we'll pick the mind of Sam Vecini from The Athletic on those draftees coming up on tomorrow's show. So make sure you check that out. With MarJon Beauchamp, the idea, and I don't know, this is glass half full type stuff, which I like to get into. The idea of potentially being a late bloomer. If people aren't aware of his development, it wasn't exactly steady right through the COVID period, a unique path, and then with the G League Ignite now to the NBA. Do you see that as part of the equation when evaluating where MarJon Beauchamp is right now and where he could be? And then I guess secondary to that point, how important do you think it is for him to be playing?
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. So let's just kind of briefly dive into it. Decided to forego the last season of his high school career in order to play at Chameleon BX, which is more of a training facility as opposed to a like actual basketball facility. COVID happens. The basketball facilities shut down around San Francisco, which is where the Chameleon BX facility is located. He can't really get a place to play and like work on his game at all. So he goes back home to Washington, and then the next year goes to play at Yakima Community College, which is, a small JUCO. And from there goes to the G League Ignite, basically because he got a workout. I believe that like Mike Miller, if I remember correctly, like pushed for MarJon to get a workout in front of, may have been Sharif Abdurrahim, may have been Rod Strickland as well, if I remember correctly. I think both of them were pretty involved in that process. Played really well in front of the workout. They were looking for another body to like fill out the G League Ignite roster. Gets the spot and plays really well in the G League, and is like, in my opinion, the one like undeniable true success story of the G League Ignite so far in the 3 years that that program has been active. So weird stop-starty process to his career where he hasn't gotten a ton of high-level basketball experience up until the Ignite, when, if I remember correctly, he was 21 already at that point, that season. So what Kane is talking about is the developmental track of this player, which is unlike basically anybody in the NBA right now. There's just not really anybody that has gone through this kind of weird stop-starty nature of his career. And because of that, I think there's a case that might, like, maybe there's a little bit more latent skill there than what we've seen. But ultimately, like in the first year, like in the NBA, for instance, I just didn't see a lot of ball skill from MarJon. And that's where the upside is going to come from him, is finding a way to improve in terms of the ball skill. You look through MarJon's rookie season. I mean, I think that he had one 20-point game. I'm looking through it now. He had one 20-point game. He had 3 games over 15 points and only had 1 game over 11 points in the calendar year of 2023. And part of that was like the way the role changed throughout the year. Part of that was, there are myriad factors for why that was, right? But when I watched him, like, I didn't feel like he was super comfortable doing anything other than like making quick decisions, dribbling in a straight line, getting out in transition, and trying to crash the offensive glass and maybe shoot a catch and shoot 3, right? That's where he'll have to expand in order to become more than just like a crash bang, aggressive, defensive minded, energy player, in my opinion. And that right now is what he translates best as. And I think that's totally okay. That's a valuable skill set to have. And I think it's valuable for the Milwaukee Bucks to have on their roster, given the way their roster currently shapes up. The real potential for him to go beyond that comes with going from being like a 32% 3-point shooter to being a 39% 3-point shooter, to being able to not just hit open catch and shoot corner threes, but being able to, if somebody closes out on me heavy, take one dribble, relocate to the right or something like that, and then shoot an open 3. It's that versatility, I think, that's going to be really important for him to showcase moving forward. And there's not a lot of it yet, but maybe you could convince me there's a case of it. He is going to turn 23 pretty early in this season, though. So, not to say 23-year-olds are done developing, but I think the shooting is where he needs to go next, and then hopefully the rest of it will come.
I think that's why I asked the question about does he need to play, because and I'm always very, very careful about like speaking about this stuff from the outside because you don't really know and people react differently. But he does seem like a player at times that can ride the roller coaster of perhaps looking really confident and then perhaps looking a little bit unsure. And maybe just the opportunities being on a contending team to play through mistakes just naturally aren't going to be there as much as they would be elsewhere. So I guess that's where I wonder for him, if he's going to maximize it and find the confidence at the level and expand his game a little bit more, it's kind of a tough situation to be in this Milwaukee team. And we get comments all the time on YouTube, just play him. But we know well enough by now that that's not necessarily how contending teams operate.
It's exactly right. It's hard to play young kids. It's hard to play rookies when you're contending. I think that Milwaukee fans will probably look at Christian Braun as a prime example of somebody. Oh, why couldn't we have just played MarJon in a role like what Christian Braun played? Christian Braun has played a lot. Like Christian Braun was a state champion in high school, won a national title at Kansas. Like has been a winner, a great decision maker, a great processor of the game, like at every level he's ever played basketball, on top of being a great athlete who can shoot a little bit. He's not a great shooter. I think that's like kind of the misconception of Christian Braun's game is like, he's honestly more like MarJon as a player than he is like a Pat Connaughton or a Grayson Allen. Right. So I get why people would say that, but like, I think where Christian is ahead of MarJon right now is just the processing and the feel and the playmaking and understanding how he needs to have that degree of confidence. Like you said, not everything's going to go right for you day one. Not everything's going to go right for you from, the moment that you step onto the court. How do you overcome that adversity? How do you have that ability? And from everything I've been told, MarJon is an unbelievable kid. Like the kid is like a great human being. Anybody that has met him will tell you like they love the kid. It's just you gain that confidence by playing through the mistakes, and it's hard to do that when you're, playing on a Milwaukee Bucks team that is trying to win now.
And it'll be fascinating with Adrian Griffin, as you pointed to. Maybe the offense functions a little bit differently, and maybe there is more opportunities for him as that off-ball guy. Maybe he can get to the basket a little bit more without the ball in his hand. I think there could be opportunities. Last one I've got on MarJon Beauchamp, because you referenced Grayson Allen and Malik Beasley and then Jay Crowder. Where did you see MarJon Beauchamp? And I guess defensively is the easiest way to guide this. Where did you see him entering the NBA in terms of the types of players he can guard, and has it changed at all? Because again, I think Crowder's at this point in his career, I think he's more of defending fours in a perfect world for the Bucks, and then you've got obviously the guards there with the other people we mentioned.
Well, and like Beasley and Grayson like aren't going to defend anybody at a high level. Grayson can
also a point.
Yeah, but like Grayson can manage on some level, and there are times where Malik can manage. But I think MarJon has a chance to be a really good defender, like a real positive out on that end through his aggressive rebounding and crashing of the glass, through his switchability, because he's really got quick feet and super long arms and has pretty good hands and can just be kind of a disruptive force in a way that like some of those other guys just can't be physically in a real substantial way. So look, I always thought he'd be switchable 2 through 4. I think I would maintain that. I think that's the hope, is that he can be switchable 2 through 4. I don't think you want him on the bigger 5s, and I don't think you want him on the quicker 1s. But I think that as long as he's kind of across that 2 through 4 positional spectrum, there are probably almost always 3 guys on the court where he's going to be okay on. And if not okay, like potentially a positive by the time he gets to be 25 years old.
And as we've discussed a lot on this show, if you're playing on the court and you find your way to get minutes alongside Giannis and Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, if he's out on the floor, you're in a pretty good position to be in a strong defensive team. And those guys will be able to cover up some of those perhaps younger mistakes that might come through. But I think he's in a pretty positive position moving forward. It's pretty good background on MarJon Beauchamp there.
And one thing I would say, just to finish on that note, because I think it's a really important one, where I wonder if MarJon can help them this season is I would venture they want to take as much pressure off of Chris Middleton defensively as humanly possible at this point in Chris Middleton's career. And having somebody like MarJon who can guard 2s and 3s in all likelihood, as opposed to Jay Crowder, who's probably more effective on 4s at this point of his career, I think is a real help to him in terms of potentially getting minutes. He needs to be able to shoot it, obviously. I think that's the most critical part. He needs to be able to prove that he can take advantage when he's open. But I do wonder if that ability to potentially guard 2s and 3s and take some pressure off of Chris Middleton might actually be able to help him get minutes.
Yeah, and I think some of those guys we mentioned clearly, well, hopefully in a perfect world, if the Bucks are contending, Chris Middleton's knees are feeling good and he's healthy and he's on the floor. Jay Crowder's a big question mark. We've discussed that. So that's also where you wonder where Beauchamp fits depending on the minutes those guys are playing during the regular season.
And a great way to reduce wear and tear on Chris Middleton's knees.
That's right. Yep.
Is be able to take some possessions off defensively. So that I think would be really helpful for him.
I definitely think he's going to have a chance in the regular season. I would say that on this roster, and we'll see whether he's able to take that opportunity. I'm shelving the chat about Damian Lillard for today's podcast. We've discussed Damian Lillard far too much on this podcast over the last couple of months. So we'll get to that on a future show. It's still interesting. It doesn't seem like anything is really happening anytime soon here with that situation, but we'll continue to cover that. That's a good chat on MarJon Beauchamp, particularly on the YouTube comments. Jump in and let us know where you're at. I do know that generally across the board, there is a lot of positivity about what this man can bring to the Bucks. And when you don't have that much young talent on the roster, it's easy to get excited about the guys that are there. Which, speaking of tomorrow's podcast, Chris Livingston, Andre Jackson Jr., Amari Moore, Sam's going to be with us again. We'll catch you all tomorrow.